because,
From the Telesur English headquarters in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm angry.
Because,
money.
Because, because, because,
money.
Because
President Nicolas Maduro has sharp criticism for the U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. Tillerson had harsh words for the Venezuelan government ahead of his last
because,
tour, calling it a demanding Venezuela holds free elections. Speaking before a crowd while accepting the nomination for re-election,
because,
a message to Tillerson
because,
in Venezuela are
because, because,
Tillerson, through a
because,
and with people's votes,
because,
Aryan revolution has won 9
because,
out of the 23 states,
because,
and all of them
because,
Congress.
because,
Presidential candidate
because,
Money.
and President Maduro was proclaimed as the candidate to seek re-election in the presidential elections, which will be held in the first quarter of the year. Maduro promised supporters to build a new
because,
He told them the president must provide the conditions to seek
because,
and the Venezuelan
because,
Money.
because, because,
earlier
because,
Defense Minister condemned remarks of
because,
the state in which he suggested that the Venezuelan military might to remove President Nicolas Maduro. Vladimir Pino Lopez
because,
didn't understand either
because,
constitution or what is going on in the country. He said that
because,
are a result of attacks from the United States and its allies, and he asked Tillerson how he could say there was a dictatorship when the Venezuelan government is calling for elections.
Tillerson doesn't know at all what we feel, what our people in the street feel, what it is to be Venezuelan and Bolivarian. He doesn't know that we need to respect the Constitution again. Outrageous. Then that means, Mr. Tillerson, according to your words, that the Bolivarian armed forces haven't respected the Constitution. What Constitution are you talking about? About some Constitution that belongs to your interests? 18th century? Or to our Constitution? The one that the will of our people adopted in 1989?
The U.S. Secretary of State in Mexico as part of a visit to several countries in South America. On top of Argentina, Peru, Colombia, and Tillerson is likely to seek support for more pressure on the Bolivarian. Early
because,
roundtable with NAFTA member countries and delegates. He met with Mexico's Foreign Minister Garay and his Canadian counterpart, Friedland. They discussed issues involved in the renegotiations of the North American Free Trade Agreement. Washington to pull out of the deal doesn't get concessions on bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States. And as Tillerson makes his way to Latin America, so is Venezuela's Foreign Minister, Jorge Arias. He's in Cuba
because,
his visit across the Caribbean and
because,
aimed at strengthening ties across. Arias met the Cuban President, Raul Castro, and Foreign Minister
because,
during his visit to the University of Sciences. He took aim at the U.S. and said he was proud at being at odds with the President Trump.
I felt very proud when I saw we were named together, but when I saw that the head of the empire in this grand era of complete imperialism named Cuba and Venezuela as its adversaries, because that means we are on the right path. If Trump applauded us, we will be on the road to damnation.
Arias' trip now kicks gear with Belize next on the list, Jose Diaz reports.
Prime Minister of Venezuela, Jorge Arreaz, in Cuba yesterday to Belize as part of his Latin American and Caribbean tour to strengthen their unity. Arreaz is expected to arrive tomorrow in Nicaragua, and even though there's still an official agenda, he's expected President Daniel Ortega.
El canciller Arreaz que mañana este país.
Son of the late leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro, committed suicide Thursday after being treated for depression for several months. Fidel Castro de Lat, or Fidelito, became a nuclear physicist in the Soviet Union and had been working as a scientific advisor to the Cuban Council of State. He was also vice president of the Cuban Academy of Science. Castro Diaz-Balart was born in 1949 during his father's marriage to Mirta Diaz-Balart. He was 68. Uruguay's family has preserved her belongings in memory of the student who was shot and killed in what became known as Peru's La Cantuta massacre 26 years ago under Alberto Fujimori. They speak of their shock at the strongman's recent release from prison.
Yo estaba sirviendo la cena para mi familiares.
Hearing about the pardon on Christmas Eve, I was serving dinner for relatives who had come to the house, and one of my children called me and said, "Mom, they just pardoned Fujimori." I couldn't believe it. A friend called me and also told me, "Carmencita," she said, "Fujimori was just pardoned." I didn't even want to eat. It was like a blow.
Hace rato ya ni ganas de comer tenía.
Ecuador enters a stage of electoral silence ahead of the referendum on Sunday, where organizations are no longer allowed to campaign. On 7 questions, which include such as land speculation, real estate, and the environment. The National Electoral Council says that 90% of electoral kits have already been delivered to cities in the country, and more than 15 million people are expected to vote. Now, voting will take place on Sunday. Disabled and elderly people are allowed to vote early. On Friday, around 150 people under the electoral program voted from their home. The election committee is also set voting centers in retirement hospitals, and the polls close at 2 p.m. This day, over 8 inmates voted from prisons across, either by post or in special polling stations. Campaigning has ended across the country. No alcohol will be sold in a referendum prohibition that lasts from Friday to Monday. The day of incident, the president of the Ecuadorian National Assembly, Jose Serrano, alerted of a bomb threat at the legislative building in Quito. All personnel were evacuated measure Ecuadorian building for any device. They've asked the public not to spread any false rumor. It's official word from the authorities. And now let's go to Costa Rica, where voting booths will open in 48 hours. The people of Costa Rica will have between 13 presidential candidates. Early polling reveals 36% of the voters are undecided. This campaign has with scandals and controversy. It is almost certain a second round, since any of the candidates reach percent of the votes. People are expected to cast president and 2 vice presidents, the Central American nation, for the period 2018 to 2022. Short break now. Join again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting on.
because
Welcome back. Heavy rains and floods have affected several countries in South America. 1,000 families have been displaced because Paraguay River over. Some areas the water level is 880 government sends more help. On Wednesday, municipality declared a state 30 days necessary funds victims.
As you can see, most the municipality has needs, especially in this
In Argentina, 10 residents were evacuated in the northwest due to overflow of the Pilcomayo. Local authorities helped transport to shelters as their homes. Risen 6 meters to continue rising over the next. These 6 people have died in across Bolivia when he was dragged by a school. 5 others were killed in accidents caused by the rain. Authorities say at least 50,000 people in 7 of the country's 9 departments left homeless. President has promised to help and provide farmers with seed. In Colombia, social leaders are pushing for a meeting between the Colombian government and the ELN on February 7th to resume the peace talks. In an open letter, they want negotiations sides, and they have also called on the international community to take a stronger lead in the process. The groups condemn the killing of social leaders in the country and the FARC political party.
We are working to peace deal. We want to see a return to dialogue. That is the only way to end this war, a war that has been so painful. We have had so many losses, and the only winners have been arms dealers.
After a month recess, the Brazilian Congress resumes its work. The most pressing matter in the agenda is the pension system reform proposed by President Michel Temer, which is rejected by workers and social movements in the country.
Political parties, workers' unions, and social organizations like Brazil's Popular Front announced a national protest with public acts, assemblies, and marches on February 19th, the day the pension reform goes to a vote in the lower house.
The real problem is the gap by the state, the lack of scruples in the way this illegitimate government is operating. But Social Security has the conditions to continue strong and supporting the Brazilian people. It's only about abiding by the law and not benefiting banks over the damage to the population, like this corrupt and illegitimate government is doing.
The fact that President Michel Temer is making a great effort the 308 votes he needs to approve the reform. His most recent attempt was during a popular TV show from the private network SBT.
This week we saw the president in a TV show defending the pension reform, making a fool of himself to the whole country. That leaves all Brazilians in shame, but we can't stay in that shame. We have to go out and fight. The task we have ahead is to strengthen the fight with energy.
This election year in Brazil to approving Congress, such an without citizen support.
A year of electoral dispute depends on many factors, but specifically on the legislative agenda, the tendency is for it to become more difficult, especially after the second semester, the vote on controversial and important topics.
Workers continue to denounce the deceitful propaganda by the government which doesn't warn people of the impacts of this measure. They also announced protests to prevent what they call a regression of rights.
The Inter-American on Human Rights met today to evaluate the pardon of the former president Fujimori. It is expected the ruling will be known in several weeks. In 2009, Fujimori was sentenced to 25 years in prison, ordering the massacres of La Cantuta and Barrios Altos, in which 25 people died, and the kidnapping of a journalist and a businessman in 1991. Peru's president, Pedro Pablo Kaczynski, granted Fujimori a pardon based on humanitarian reasons. And more news from the Ministry of Agriculture and Campesino signed an agreement to end the farmers' strike over the increase of potato prices that hit 6 regions of the country in the past 3 days. 2 people were killed during with the police. Demonstrators were dispersed with reportedly hit with rubber. The delegate of the potato producers responded to 90.
We have come today because the Ministry of Agriculture has listened. Just today we were able to express all of our worries to resolve the most important issues. We have reached an agreement to all farmers to leave the streets.
To us, it is very because reached an agreement based on the farmers and the work table we produced from the Ministry of Agriculture. But first, all I express my sincere condolences to those who died during this rightful protest.
We take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
Money. Because money. Because money.
Welcome back. An undocumented Cuban immigrant has died in a detention center as the Trump administration continues of immigration and customs. Julio Castro Garrido died Tuesday while in custody at the Stewart detention. Immigrants' rights an immediate investigation, public release as the immediate shutdown. This has been the 3rd death in a Georgia immigration detention center in less than a year, with rights groups attributing to systematic actions. Trump has approved the release of a class memo which accuses the FBI of abusing power against the of the FBI and the U.S. The memo argued because bias at the FBI and justice, which, according to Republicans, use unsubstantiated evidence to extend electronic surveillance of a campaign advisor, and was financed by then-candidate Hillary Clinton.
Because, what's going on in this country, I think it's a disgrace. The memo was sent to Congress. It was declassified. Congress will do whatever they're going to do. But I think it's a disgrace what's happening in our country.
The enraged father of 3 daughters sexually abused by Larry Nassar lunged at a USA Gymnastics national team during a sentencing hearing in a Michigan courtroom on Friday. Court guards pinned Randall Margraves to the ground before he could attack Nassar. His daughters, Margraves, had finished reading statements on the second day at a court in Eaton County. He returned to the court and apologized. He was embarrassed and he lost control. The judge accepted his apology and released him without charge, but warned next time he could use the legal system to seek justice. Nassar has been sentenced to 175 years behind bars. The British man who ran into a group of worshippers outside a mosque last year has been sentenced to life imprisonment. Found Darren Osborne guilty of murder and attempted murder, highlighting that he planned and carried out this attack because of his hatred of Muslims. Osborne allegedly became obsessed with Muslims after watching a TV drama about child sex abuse involving British Pakistani men. The attack killed 1 and injured scores others. 10 bodies have washed up on shores after the UN Migration Agency reported that 90 to 100 bodies are feared to have drowned off the coast of Libya as the smugglers' boat dies early on Friday. 3 survivors are confirmed.
Now, the full scope of it yet, we don't know the details of it, but we do know that bodies have been washing ashore off Zwara in Libya for the last couple of hours, and there's a couple of survivors, and they've been telling us that there's, they think 90 Pakistanis on board.
Now let's have a look at other news from around the world.
The United Human Rights Office has called on Myanmar to release 2 detained journalists that were denied bail. Reuters' coverage of the crisis where an army crackdown triggered the flight of nearly 700,000 Muslims to neighboring Bangladesh.
We deeply regret the continuing detention of 2 Reuters journalists in Myanmar, following yesterday's decision by a court to refuse them bail, and we repeat calls for their immediate release.
In Syria, airstrikes hit a rebel-controlled enclave east of the capital of Damascus. At least 3 people were wounded. International concern rising over the fate of 400 living in besieged, rebel-held, where there is a shortage. Auto workers in Germany have joined a strike in Berlin. About 5,000 from Mercedes-Benz and BMW are demanding an 8% pay raise and a reduced work. Employers are seeking to in the dispute, which has been ongoing since January. About in Bavaria, Baden, and other regions took part in the nationwide strike.
We need more money so we can continue to care for our families. Not giving more money willingly. Everyone has to take care and can get more money.
Currency Bitcoin has suffered its worst week in almost 5 years. It fell 30%, sliding below $7,600. Just 3 months ago, Bitcoin was worth $19,000. Traders blamed the regulatory down in India and South Korea, Facebook's decision to ban cryptocurrency ads, and investigations into some dubious activities relating to e-wallets.
An area survey done by lasers over Guatemala has found over 60 new Mayan structures. The technology was used to discover what lay beneath the canopy, and it revealed houses, palaces, and defensive fortifications. Researchers mapped more than 100 square miles of
because, you know,
the research was done using
because,
which is short for light detection. It works by beaming laser pulses at the ground and measuring the wavelengths. And we've come to the end.
because,
For these and many other stories, you can find our website at
because, you know,
/English.
because, you know, because, you know,
Facebook, Twitter,
because, you know,
that's your English. I'm
because, you know,
watching.
because, you know, because, 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 you know.